In July of the year 1324, the merchants of Cairo watched something walk out of the desert that no one alive had ever seen. A caravan so long it took days to pass. The chroniclers counted 60,000 people and 80 camels, each one loaded with 300 pounds of pure gold dust. At the head of it rode one man. Within weeks, that man would give away so much gold in the streets of Cairo that the price of gold itself collapsed and stayed broken for more than a decade. One historian visited 12 years later and wrote that the market had still not recovered. Here is the strangest part. He never meant to do it. His name was Mansa Musa, and historians call him the richest human being who ever lived, richer than any billionaire alive today. So pull up a chair, because tonight we find out how a king breaks gold by accident. Hear that? That's my fire settling in. I'm Daniel Reed, and this is Fireside History, where the greatest true stories of the past are told slowly, clearly, and warmly, so you can enjoy them and grow your English at the same time. Tonight we cross the Sahara Desert with a king the maps of Europe had never heard of, and we follow the one journey that put him, quite literally, on the map. Get comfortable. The fire is lit, and we are going back 700 years. 700 years ago in West Africa, there was an empire most of the world did not know existed. It was called Mali, and it stretched wider than Western Europe. Grasslands, rivers, and trading cities strung along the great Niger River, like beads on a thread. Two things made Mali quietly, impossibly rich: gold and salt. Under its soil lay some of the richest goldfields on earth, and by some estimates, nearly half of all the gold in the Old World passed through Mali's hands. In the burning north of the empire sat mines of salt, which in the desert was traded, pound for pound, almost like gold itself. A trade route, by the way, is simply a road that merchants travel again and again, and Mali sat on the crossroads of the greatest trade routes in Africa. Into this empire, around the year 1280, a boy named Musa was born into the royal family. Nothing suggested he would ever rule. He was not the king's son. He was, at best, a deputy, a trusted assistant to the throne. Then came the strangest disappearance in African history. The emperor before Musa, a restless man named Abu Bakr, became obsessed with a question: what lies on the other side of the Atlantic Ocean? The story goes that he equipped 200 boats and sent them west into the open sea. A single boat returned, so the emperor built 2,000 more, placed Musa in charge of the empire, and sailed into the horizon himself. He was never seen again. And just like that, by pure accident, Musa became Mansa, which in his language meant emperor. Remember that word. Accident. It is going to follow this man his entire life. Now, you might think the story ends here. A man inherits the richest empire on earth. What problem could he possibly have? Here is the problem. Nobody knew. Beyond the desert, Musa's empire was invisible. The great powers of Egypt, Arabia, and Europe had never heard his name. To them, the lands south of the Sahara were a blank space on the map. Rumors, at best. All that gold, all those cities, all that learning, and to the outside world, Mali simply did not exist. For a proud king, that is its own kind of poverty. There was something deeper too. Musa was a devout Muslim, and his faith asked of him one great journey: the pilgrimage to the holy city of Mecca, a journey called the Hajj. A pilgrimage, if the word is new to you, is a sacred journey, a trip you make not for money or pleasure, but for your soul. For Musa, that journey meant crossing the Sahara, 3,000 miles of the deadliest desert on earth, sandstorms that buried whole caravans, weeks between wells. Kings before him had left Mali on great journeys and never come home, and he had taken his own throne from one of them. He would be risking his life, his crown, and his empire's future on a single walk across the sand. He decided to go anyway. But Musa did not plan a journey. He planned a statement. If the world did not know Mali existed, then the world was about to find out. All at once, for months, maybe years, the empire prepared. Gold was mined, melted, and poured into bars. Gold dust was sealed into bags. Fine silk was imported for robes. Food, water, and feed were calculated for a city on the move, because that is what this caravan would be, a moving city. The numbers the chroniclers recorded still sound like a legend. 60,000 travelers, 12,000 servants dressed in silk and brocade, 500 men who marched in front, each carrying a staff of solid gold, and those 80 camels sagging under their 300 pounds of gold dust each. One detail tells you everything about Musa's thinking. Even his servants were dressed richer than most kings. In the year 1324, the gates opened, and the city began to walk. Destination, Mecca, 3,000 miles away, with the whole known world watching the road. And the road led straight through the richest, proudest city of the age. Cairo, crossing the Sahara with 60,000 people, should have been impossible. Caravans 100th of that size died in those sands every year. Yet Musa's moving city advanced like clockwork, scouts ahead to find the wells, supplies rationed with military discipline, the whole column resting through the killing heat of midday and marching in the cool of the evening. Month after month, the caravan crawled across the map, and ahead of it, faster than any camel, traveled something Musa could not control. The rumor, a king is coming out of the desert, a king made of gold. By the way, if you're enjoying this story by the fire, subscribing to Fireside History is the best way to keep this fire burning. Now, back to the desert, because the gates of Cairo are about to open. In July 1325, after roughly a year on the road, the rumor came true. Musa's caravan arrived beneath the walls of Cairo, and the city simply stopped. Merchants abandoned their stalls. Crowds climbed the walls to look. The chroniclers of Egypt, men who had seen sultans and conquerors come and go, reached for their pens and struggled for words. Egypt's own ruler, the Sultan al-Nasir, sent word. The great visitor was welcome at the palace. It should have been a friendly meeting between two of the most powerful men alive. Instead, it nearly became a disaster. Inside the Sultan's palace, protocol demanded one thing of every visitor, king or beggar: kiss the ground before Egypt's ruler. Musa refused. Gasps went around the hall. In that world, this was not rudeness. It was very nearly a declaration of war. Advisors whispered urgently on both sides. The richest man alive stood in the palace of the proudest ruler alive, and neither would bow first. Then Musa found the answer of a chess master. He knelt, but declared, loudly enough for the whole court to hear, that he was bowing to God alone, not to any man. The Sultan offered a way out that insulted no one, rose and embraced him. The two kings sat together as equals. Crisis averted. Or so everyone thought. Because the real crisis was already pouring into the streets. Musa had come as a pilgrim, and his faith called for generosity, so he gave. He gave gold to officials and gold to scholars, gold to the poor lining the roads, gold to merchants, to mosques, to practically every open hand in Cairo. The chroniclers describe it almost with disbelief, a man spreading, as one wrote, waves of gold across the city. For a few glorious weeks, Cairo floated on it, and then the oldest law of money quietly took its revenge. When something is everywhere, it stops being precious. There was suddenly so much gold in Cairo that gold itself lost its value. By some accounts, it fell by a fifth or more, and an Arab historian named al-Umari, visiting 12 years later, recorded that the market had still not fully recovered. One man, one visit, one broken currency, entirely by accident. And the desert had one more humbling lesson waiting. On the return journey, the unthinkable happened. The richest man in history ran short of gold. Far from home, Musa had to borrow from Cairo's lenders, at brutal interest. The man who had crashed the price of gold on his way east now helped push it back up on his way west, buying his own gold back at a premium. He may be the only person who ever controlled the world's gold price in both directions, without trying to do either. A smaller man would have gone home embarrassed and buried the whole story. Musa went home carrying something better than the gold he had lost. He had seen Cairo's libraries, its universities, its architects, and he understood, perhaps for the first time, what wealth was actually for. Gold, he had just learned in the most public way possible, can lose its value in a single summer. Knowledge does not. So he made the decision that separates him from every rich man who is merely rich. He stopped collecting gold and started converting it. Riding home in his caravan were scholars from the holy cities, books by the crate, and one prize above all, a celebrated architect and poet named al-Sahili, hired away from the courts of Andalusia and Cairo. The story goes that Musa paid him a fortune in gold for his work. The empire that the world had finally noticed was about to give the world a reason to keep looking. I got attention, a modern businessman might say. Now I build something worth the attention. Now, let's pay off the promise from the beginning of this story, what the accident in Cairo actually bought. In the city of Timbuktu, al-Sahili raised the Jingwereber Mosque, a masterpiece of earth and timber, finished around 1327, so solidly built that it still stands today, nearly 700 years later. Around it, Musa poured his converted gold into something no currency crash could touch, the Sankore Center of Learning, which grew into one of the great universities of the medieval world. Timbuktu filled with the most valuable import of all, books. Manuscripts on astronomy, medicine, law, and mathematics were copied, traded, and treasured. In Timbuktu, it was said that the book trade rivaled the gold trade. A city at the edge of the Sahara became a word that, even in our century, still means the ends of the earth. Except in Musa's century, it meant the center of it. And Europe? Europe finally reached for its pen. In 1375, half a century after the Cairo summer, mapmakers in Catalonia produced one of the most famous maps of the Middle Ages. And there, drawn over the blank space that Africa used to be, sits a black king on a golden throne, crowned in gold, holding up a nugget of gold like a small sun. His name is written beside him, Musa Meli. Musa of Mali. The king nobody knew had become the king nobody could forget. When he died, around 1337, historians tried to calculate his fortune and eventually gave up. To this day, the most honest estimate remains the one you'll find in the record books. Richer than anyone, ever. Wealth, as one modern historian put it, beyond calculation. I got attention, a modern businessman might say. Now I build something worth the attention. Think back now to that Cairo marketplace where our story began. The gold Musa scattered there, spent, melted, scattered again. Within a generation, you could not point to a single coin of it. The price of gold recovered, the merchants moved on, and the greatest fortune in history did what every fortune eventually does. It evaporated. But the mosque is still standing. The manuscripts of Timbuktu are still being read. The map with the Golden King still hangs in a library in Paris. Everything Musa spent is gone. Everything he built and everything he learned, still here, 7 centuries later. That is the quiet lesson under all that gold, my friend, and it belongs to you as much as to any emperor. Money can lose its value in a single summer, one accident, in one marketplace. But what you learn cannot be devalued, cannot be borrowed against, and cannot be stolen at the city gates. Every English word you understood tonight is a coin in the one currency that never crashes. Musa needed 60,000 people to make the world take notice. You just need this, one story at a time, one evening at a time, by a warm fire. So here is my question for you tonight, and I read every answer. If you held Mansa Musa's gold for just one day, would you spend it or give it away? One word in the comments, spend or give. Let's see which side of the fire you sit on. If this story earned it, subscribe. There is a new chair by this fire every Tuesday and Friday. And next time, we jump from the richest man in history to a woman who started with almost nothing at all. America, 1888. A young widow scrubbing other people's laundry for $1.50 a day, who would end her life in a mansion beside the Rockefellers as her country's first self-made female millionaire. How? That story is waiting by the fire. The fire's still warm, and there is always a chair for you. I'm Daniel Reed, and this is Fireside History.